Hello everyone and welcome back. So we have a lot of news today. So Creative Assembly have just done the first of their alpha strikes. This is showcasing the alpha build for Total War Warhammer 40,000. They're very specialized on specific portions of the game, this one focusing around range combat. I've been watching along for their stream and I've taken a bunch of notes. I want to talk about that because there's a lot of just detail in general. So let's just jump right in. I've got about 2 pages here. So the build shown is a couple of months old, so everything that you've seen from Billy and the last demos is the same thing, and it's a direct game recording, meaning that they do have a developer playing this live. Naturally, there has been some changes since the game got announced in December, UI changes and the rest, because everything is still subject to development. And the battle they're going to be showcasing is Orcs versus Astra Militarum, so Imperial Guard. The map looks pretty decent, I'm not going to lie. The only thing I don't like too much is that the deployment lines aren't too good. Hopefully those get made a little bit thicker, or maybe there is just some extra options to make them more pronounced. This map is quite flat, but they do mention the fact that there's loads of different maps with different elevation types, different cover, and the rest, so not to be worried there. I assume they picked a flatter map just because it's easier to get better footage, especially since this is live. This can always be a little bit strange. Now, reserves are, of course, still a thing, so this is basically reinforcements, but they won't start with the battle. Essentially, you can bring them in when they're needed. Drop pods are mentioned, obviously, with the Space Marines, but the Imperial Guard will be coming in more with like stuff like Valkyries. They come from surrounding armies, so think of this very much as the reinforcement mechanic in Warhammer 3, but a little bit better to control. It does seem that you can just decide when they come in, rather than not really having a decision. That's one of the weaker points of Warhammer 3, especially if you're taking multiple armies to attack certain areas. We do get information about the rows above the minimap, so for the Astra Militarum, there's 2 different things. There are bombardments, because they use a lot of gunfire, and they've got fleets surrounding, and regimental orders. Basically, faction mechanics. If you've played Total War Warhammer 3, you'll be very well versed with this, as the Warhammer 3 factions do have their own faction battle mechanics alongside certain others, with like the Black Arcs for the Dark Elves. They claim that everything is going to be inspired by the tabletop mechanics, and yeah, that makes sense. Everything with the fantasy version was basically the same way. There were people that were worried about like no Vanguard deployment, but that does exist with the Carsicans, for example, where it's called forward deployment. So far, it's looking like, yes, they're making a Total War game alongside just making it a little bit more modern in regards to that for 40k. The faction battle mechanics, I imagine, might vary depending on the lord that you play, the sub-faction, and the rest. So here's hoping, at least. Obviously, no concrete details on that just yet. But it would be kind of cool, especially as we are getting a lot of big-name characters like Nazdrag and Gazkul. When we see different lords, it would be nice just to see a little bit of a difference. But with a guard, very basic, well, not basic, but you know what I mean. A lot of big shooting. Obviously makes sense for a lot of supporting fire, which is very, very useful. This one's a very big one, so obviously Warhammer 3 was more Hero Hammer focused, which was very similar to that of 5th edition, whereas now with 40k, we'll be seeing characters with units. Bodyguard units will be shown. The units themselves will vary quite a bit, and that depends on your specific playstyle, which means that you can have a character with, say, for example, Carsicans or Standard Guard. I like this. I think it's a nice return to traditional Total War, which I think a lot of people want, and a lot of people have been putting characters into units in 40k recently. I believe that's a big thing right now when it comes to 11th edition. I've not really had too much of a chance to play 11th because I am working on my Soul Drinkers, and it takes a while because I want them to look nice and pretty. They do mention, like, sergeants by themselves aren't going to work, but I hope that we can still have the typical Smash Captain stuff. This is something that, if you don't play 40k, back in the day, and I think still nowadays, but just not so much, you could have lone characters throw themselves out there and do quite a lot of damage. Obviously, the big named ones should be able to support themselves, but we'll have to see on how that goes, especially as this game continues to evolve. Alright, so from a battle perspective, this is pretty cool. You see a load of Orcs versus a load of Guard. The Orc AI seems to be kind of focusing on like specific targets. Of course, remember, this is still very early, so some stuff can be a bit weird. Like, for example, there is a clip that will be on screen at some point where an Orc truck just kind of goes by itself. This is something that we've been seeing a lot in Warhammer 3, but again, subject to change. they're going to be doing stuff. Remember, this is a new engine, and they're probably still tweaking stuff. And they do mention that they are doing loads of different overhauls when it comes to it. But what you can see is the guard going into cover a lot. You can see a lot of orcs moving around the field as they get closer and closer. It's good to feel that overwhelming sense that a war is coming straight at you. Terrain being blasted, a lot of fire coming from, say, for example, the Baneblade. And this is why I'm really happy that Creative Assembly is showcasing a full-on battle. So I didn't want to see more of that trailer footage and the rest, because what happens there is everything can just kind of be showcased around and they can just skip stuff. We've seen some animation jank here. For example, when they were looking at the sergeant and the Corsican were in that unit, one of them was basically halfway into a pipe. That's great, because we're seeing things live. Again, that stuff will be fixed up, but this means that we can look at stuff in a more realistic sense. Unit movement seems to be quite good. I've not really seen too much jank over there, and the rate of fire is fantastic overall. It's nice seeing the orcs go through terrain. It's really weird seeing them just go in through the water, though. Like, I feel like the bridge would have helped. But you can see kind of fluid movement with, like, say, the Storm Boys and all the rest. Yeah, this looks to me like a Total War game. You know, they mention, you know, that, oh, this is going to be optimized and it's still going through optimization features and stuff. But I want to see some jank from a game that isn't ready yet, right? Rather than it being super polished where it looks a bit too clean, if you get what I mean. We've had that, like, say, for example, with Rome 2. Obviously, when it gets closer to release, we're expecting it to be a lot more polished, but I'm loving what I'm seeing so far. This is giving me very much good vibes. The orcs are swarming. We can see the players, I believe the dev is called Will, bringing in reserves, which is feeling a little bit more natural as they're coming in. They're going into supporting areas, putting them into cover fire. Cover fire being very important in a game like this, especially as the edition itself, 11th edition, is focusing very heavily on cover fire. It is confirmed that you can have up to 40 units on the field, which is obviously very similar to Total War games so far, but it does look like it's going to be quite large in that scale, because obviously Orc Boy units and Guardsman units are going to be quite large. You can see it as the game is progressing. There is so many icons on screen, it feels like there's just a lot of enemies to fight. From a UI perspective, the only thing I don't like, and I've mentioned this before, is the minimap down there at the bottom right hand corner. So I'm really hoping that Creative Assembly do have some plans to allow for some customization features, so it allows for, you know, that to be moved up to be more traditional with other Total War games. Creative Assembly have confirmed that projectiles have been upgraded in an engine, so they're all real. They're all there and do as much or as little damage as possible, because they can miss, there is evasion and the rest. They've explained that they had a full-on overhaul on how range combat works to make it as fluid as possible, and hopefully that can be used, say, for example, in Medieval 3, the game after this. That means, yeah, a lot more damage is going to be done. This is something that we've noticed, for example, in Warhammer 3, where a bunch of arrows will make contact, but it won't actually be seen or actually felt when it comes to reduction of health. This happens fairly often with range units, actually, and you can set your troops to fire destructible terrain to increase advantages and disadvantages on the battlefield. Maybe you want to get rid of a bunch of cover fire with some long-range artillery, so that way the enemy cannot bog themselves down, whilst also still doing damage, because yes, there is splash damage when it comes to terrain being destroyed, tanks going haywire, and the rest. They mentioned that there's Storm Boys that go haywire, and they can actually hurt people as they just, like, land and explode and the rest. But I want to see how that happens to the more sophisticated weaponry like the executioners and repulsors in general. So they showcased this battle multiple times. Yeah, I know some people are going to be a bit angry about that, but I'd rather one battle where they can just go with all the details that need to be done, rather than going multiple battles and stuff not being showcased as they talk about it, because there have been cases with that in Warhammer 3, where they were kind of showcasing streams and nothing was really going as intended, with like showcasing flanking fire and the rest, which again is in game. They talk about that being heavy emphasis, but we've always kind of had that. It does do a leadership dump, and yes, morale, aka leadership, is still a thing when it comes to this title. Alright, so one thing that we need to talk about is that mixed units are a thing again. So this isn't going to be like what happens in Warhammer 3, where units basically stay the same. Units will have different profiles, meaning that they'll have different ways to attack light, medium, and heavy armor. They'll have different types of weapons. There is full command from what we can see there. We can see Voxcasters and the rest with the Corsicans, and different types of weaponry are going to do different types of things. So you might have the Corsicans with their primary as, say, for example, las guns, but they will also have, say, plasma guns and the rest. These are all very different. I know that can be confusing for those who haven't played Warhammer 40k stuff, but think of it like when you take your state troopers with sword and board, but also some spears and also with some bows, right? That's basically it, but just a lot more range. There is, of course, a lot more detailed stats, which is very important. I was kind of concerned that maybe that won't be a thing, but those will be tied to each of the different types of weapons that we will see in the units of Corsikans, which this unit of Corsican is just 16. I'm not sure what unit sizes they're using. I'm not sure if they stated that, but who knows in the future, so that, you know, you can see like armor, evasion, defense, charge defense, max speed, charge speed. Apparently ammo doesn't run out, so you're always going to be firing. So that's going to be kind of interesting to see, especially with some very long range and still fast moving Space Marine units that we can get access to, well, depending if they're in the launch or in the DLC in the future. The primary weapon will be the default for that unit. Even if they're mixed, if you're going with specific battle tactics, you've got to come with that in mind, and the unit will think with that in mind. So las guns, as soon as it can get into combat, then it'll start to fire. I'm assuming what they mean here, and I'm going to have to ask a bunch of questions to Creative Assembly. If there's a long-range unit in that primary lasgun unit, it'll still fire as soon as enemies get in range, but it might move closer if the primary weapon gets told to get closer to be able to fire and the rest, right? I've got so many questions, and yeah, right now Creative Assembly aren't really answering to creators and stuff until I'm assuming later down the line. So hopefully, you know, I can get a point where I can just ask, because I have a notepad here with maybe like 12 pages worth of questions. That's mostly just kind of revolving around combat. Not just like shooting, because it's answered a lot here, but a lot of melee stuff, which they said they might do a melee one in the future, and I'm really, really excited about that one too. Damage being split between light, medium, and heavy is quite interesting. Obviously, we do know that there's a lot of different armor types when it comes to 40k. I'm really curious as maybe that might change around. What happens when a super heavy comes in, or is like the Gargant just naturally considered a heavy unit and that's it? It probably is now, considering that it's being playable, but will that stuff change in the future, or will there be more just different effects, like for example in Warhammer 3 at the bottom, where there's extra like physical resistance, all the rest? Honestly, the more I see it, the more excited I am. I was kind of worried originally when they announced Total War 40k. I mean, we all kind of knew it was coming, but it's like, you know, it's going to be difficult. But this is looking good. It's good to see that it's not being dumbed down for the sake of console, because this is still looking like a Total War. There's personal stuff that I don't like about the UI, but so far so good. And I think this is going to showcase very well in the future once they start going into more heavy detail. Guard look very cool. The Orcs look very cool. They mentioned a lot of stuff with the Space Marines, like the Assault Intercessors and the jump packs there, which, you know, that's going to be cool to see when they eventually show Space Marines. Still no word on the Eldar, so I imagine that the Eldar was the last faction that they're working with, and they're still kind of ironing out how things are going to work, especially, you know, it's very highly mobile. So they probably went with Guards and Orcs because it's more traditional, you know, it's going to be frontline, shooting, and the rest, whereas Space Marines is going to be more elite. And the Eldar are likely going to be very, very mobile, kind of like how the Wood Elves kind of work in Total War Warhammer 3. And yeah, I just can't wait. I really want to see Space Marines. I really, really want to see Eldar, because, you know, Xenos factions are cool. Orcs are great, but I want to see high mobility, teleports, and the rest from Warp Spiders, and like just so many cool stuff for the Eldar. So keeping true to the theme of 40k, cover fire is very important. They showcased this clip and they kept repeating it. A Guardsman regiment charging into the just battlements over there. It's kind of interesting to see. Obviously, if you're going to just charge in your guard, you're going to get suppressed. Suppression fire does exist, and yes, flamers will come in. You can actually see the different types of unit weapons coming in. It's not very close, but this is really, really important. I feel like this is going to showcase just how dynamic the battles could be if everything works as intended, and it's made me quite excited for that. Defensive capabilities are important. You can get rid of cover by destroying it and the rest, and you don't want to just charge in willy-nilly. Obviously, you'll be able to do that with Orcs, and they do mention that other factions will have ways to deal with charging in, so they're not just constantly getting destroyed by suppression fire. I like this. I think it's really important just to show how dynamic combat is in the 41st millennium. Definitely would have been cool to see some other examples, just for the sake of, like, you know, how would Orcs deal with that? And they do showcase it with some other clips, but I like the idea of you're charging into death row, you're likely going to have some issues. Likely there might be some characters to provide some bonuses for that, because that is quite important. Also, we do know that if they're going to be taking effects from the tabletop, yes, you're going to have some better charges with, say, sergeants and maybe Death Corps if we get them in the future, which I mean, should happen, right? And we can see over here with the exact same way, this is when snipers are defending and they're being attacked by flamers, a very big damage, so you can't always like hope that your defenses are going to protect you. Flamers are going to do massive damage to your units, and they're going to be able to just envelop you over there. It looks like the flames stay quite a decent amount of time, and oh my god, it's just like the flamers in general look great. Fire's always been kind of weird for Total War, so it does look like Warcore, the brand new engine, is going to have some nice big changes there when it comes to just visual effects, which is something that's always been a problem, I guess. Like, it's not like sugar-coated, it's always kind of looked a bit too cartoony. This is one thing I was really hoping to see, so Ogren's coming in, breaking through cover, and just smashing into the Guardsman line. I would have liked to see some Guardsmen, because we can still have this with some units in Warhammer 3, still trying to fire, but maybe put a risk there and some friendly fire on the rest. It does look like it's more just like going in, but again, still very early, so we can't really go, oh, you know, this is bad or whatever. It looks good. The Ogrens are, yeah, they're working as expected. That's fantastic. I'm loving the fact that from what we've been able to see, units are going to be working so differently from each other. This isn't a thing like in Warhammer 3 or even some other games like Three Kingdoms. A lot of similarities, right? You have a lot of guns, yes, and this is going to be a very shooty-based game, but a lot of the guns are going to be very different. Elevation fire has been showcased quite decently, so you've got one unit quite far up and then one down, both of them in cover, but obviously the one in a higher elevation is going to be doing more damage. Obviously that's kind of expected with just how logic works with firepower, but it's good to see it in action. We need to see more clips like this, and I'm hoping that Creative Assembly will start just releasing more and more clips of different types of weaponry being fired around, because this stuff is what makes the 40k fan base just go a little bit wild, and in general, it's what needs to be done just to showcase more weapons at work, more weapons at play. There's so many different types of weapons when it comes to 40k. It's not just all bolter, bolter, bolter. Keep that in mind. And even then, plasmas can be quite different. Just in general, there's so much stuff that can come into play. But this looks great, and it's good to see. Obviously, that means that you can just hunker down, fire down. There's some risk there because they can hurt you, but yeah, more battle tactics. And we've been able to see that through their gameplay showcase. There's a lot more battle tactics in play. One thing that Total War kind of suffered from a lot was the rock, paper, scissors mechanic. That's still going to come into play, but it's going to be a little bit more, and that comes in with strafing. Strafing is going to be introduced properly. So we technically already had this with fire whilst moving, and we've had units that could fire whilst moving backwards, but never really like this. Essentially, yeah, it's a proper strafe. They're going to move back, they're going to shoot. Some units will be less accurate, some won't be. They specifically mention like Space Marines are going to be okay to strafe and fire, which makes me very excited to see what's going to happen when we get some heavy Gravis units. Big fan of those. So I'm pretty happy about this. I think that this is going to be quite interesting in terms of battle tactics. This is looking like the ultimate Total War game. It's looking like the ultimate Warhammer game there too. So this is going to be really cool. Obviously, they've got some Scout Sentinels there just being able to fire in, and the Orcs charging up against it. Strafe is going to be really cool if everything works as intended. Seeing as a lot of things can strafe, they said like the tanks, standard units, and the rest. I'm really curious to see how this is going to work in terms of unit responsiveness. So far, this is looking so really good, and Josh did mention that this was recorded in some of the most recent builds, so basically anything that's just been like a repeating clip is something more, like, well, recent, I think is probably the best way of saying it, whilst anything that was live was on an older build. That's as far as I'm understanding it, I guess. I think it makes sense, considering, yes, they do have different builds, believe me, like, I mean, you can go back a few months anyway on Warhammer 3 right now. And that's just live. The last thing they've showcased is sweeping fire. So this is something just really cool. I mean, I'm not going to lie. The Baneblade just shooting with everything, because obviously sponsor upgrades and the rest, means a lot of firepower going out. And they do mention that you can have units firing in multiple locations depending on the unit upgrades and the rest. So this is really cool to see. It's so much firepower. It's making me want to paint up that Baneblade I've had for a while. I'm not going to lie. This is all looking really, really exciting. I am a lot more optimistic for Total War 40k than I was originally when it was announced, because obviously we didn't really see too much, because with those trailers it was just like second clips here and there, well, half second, whereas this is starting to look very, very tasty. So we're definitely going to have to wait and see how this progresses, but they did say that there's a smaller stream coming up at some point. I think they said this month. I'm assuming they're just going to build up until Gamescom. Gamescom, there'll be a larger reveal, and then they'll start jumping into all the other stuff there too. Alongside that, yeah, we do need to get some information on Lords of the End Times, so I imagine that that's going to take a little bit of a pushback during August, because they did say that there's nothing happening for Lords of the End Times in July. Yeah, no, this is looking good. I've got a lot of notes. I likely will do some more follow-up videos, but I just want to talk about the immediate stuff that I learned, and throw some questions at CA and hope for some answers, because this is looking very good. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Let's start a discussion. And I'll see you all again very, very soon, guys. Have a good day. Bye.